Welcome to the deep dive. We're diving into AI ethics today.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is, especially with how AI is, everywhere these days.
Right, and doing more and more,
Right.
like healthcare, or even like deciding what news we see.
Exactly. You guys sent in some really interesting sources on this, so I'm excited to really dig in.
Yeah, it's a crucial time to be talking about this stuff for sure. As AI gets more powerful, the ethics become even more, well, crucial.
Totally. Okay, so one of the biggest things that jumps out from these sources is, well, data privacy. I
Hmm.
mean, it's kind of freaky how much data these AI systems need to, even work.
Right. It is like every time we're online, basically,
Yeah.
shopping, social media, even just using our phones.
Yeah, it's like you're leaving this trail of data everywhere you go, and it all feeds into these AI systems.
Right. And a lot of those systems, they're using machine learning, so they're constantly learning and getting better,
Huh.
which means they need more and more data.
So we're basically the fuel then.
Kind of, yeah. That's why this whole privacy question is so important, because it's our data they're using.
One of the sources mentioned the GDPR as like a step towards setting some boundaries around data. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the GDPR, that's the General Data Protection Regulation. It's this set of rules in Europe about how companies can use people's data.
Yeah.
They have to be way more transparent about what they're collecting and how they're using it.
So it's kind of like drawing a line, saying, hey, you can't just grab our data and do
In
whatever.
fact, it gives individuals more control.
But does it really work? Like for AI specifically?
Well, it's definitely made companies think more carefully about data, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not perfect, especially with AI where things get, complex.
For sure. One of the sources mentioned this idea of algorithmic transparency. So basically, should companies have to explain how their AI is using our data?
Yeah, algorithmic transparency. It's this idea that instead of the algorithms being these mysterious black boxes,
Mm.
we should be able to understand how they work, how they make decisions.
Right, because right now it's kind of like we're just trusting them blindly.
Hmm.
I think I'd feel a lot better if I knew what was going on under the hood.
It makes sense. Transparency builds trust, and if we understand how these systems work, then we can start to really assess whether they're fair, unbiased, all that.
And that leads right into another huge concern with AI, which is bias. These things don't just magically appear, right? They're built by people.
Exactly. And people, we all have our own biases, whether we realize it or not.
And those biases can get baked into the AI.
Right. So if the data used to train an AI is biased, the AI itself is probably going to be biased too.
And potentially even worse because AI can do things on such a large scale.
Definitely. And we've already seen real-world examples of this happening.
Like what?
Well, there have been issues with facial recognition systems, for example, struggling to accurately identify people with certain skin tones.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense. If the data it's trained on is mostly like one type of face, then it's
Yeah.
going to have trouble with other types.
Exactly. And it's not just facial recognition. We've seen similar biases in AI systems for hiring, loan approvals, even in the criminal justice system.
Okay, so how do we fix this?
Well, one thing people are working on is debiasing algorithms.
Uh-huh.
So trying to identify and correct the biases within the systems themselves.
So like going in and removing the bad stuff.
Yeah, it's a very complex process, but there are a bunch of different approaches being explored.
Right.
Like one is to just use more diverse data sets to train the AI.
So it's exposed to a wider range of, well, everything.
Exactly. Another approach is to design algorithms that are specifically meant to be fair, even if the data they're learning from is biased.
That's interesting. But can we ever really create an AI that's like completely unbiased?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's probably an ongoing process. AI is constantly learning and evolving, so we need to be constantly monitoring and adjusting to make sure things stay fair.
So it's like we're still figuring out the recipe.
Kind of, yeah. But at least people are aware of the problem and actively working on it.
And that kind of leads into this whole other question of accountability, right? Because if an AI messes up, who's responsible?
Right, that's a big one. And it gets even trickier as AI starts making more and more decisions that affect our lives, like in healthcare or finance.
One of the sources used self-driving cars as an example. Like,
Yeah.
if there's an accident, who do you blame?
Right. Is it the developer who made the AI? The
Oh.
company that built the car?
Yeah.
The person in the car who was supposed to be, paying attention?
It's like, where does the responsibility lie?
Exactly. And this is something that lawyers and policymakers are really starting to grapple with because our current laws are mostly about, human actions and intent.
But with AI, it's different.
It is. And so some people think we need to change the laws, maybe even create whole new laws just for AI.
Wow. Okay, so aside from the legal stuff, what about the ethical considerations?
Right, because one of the sources pointed out that, well, AI doesn't have empathy or moral reasoning.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Like an AI might be able to, I don't know, diagnose a disease with incredible accuracy, but
But it might not understand how to tell someone that news in a sensitive way
yeah,
or how to weigh the different ethical factors involved in treatment.
right. It's missing that human element.
Exactly. And that's a huge concern when we're talking about AI being used in really sensitive areas like healthcare, finance, or even criminal justice.
So, okay, given all of this, how much decision-making power should we give to AI? I mean, it's already doing things like approving loans and helping with medical diagnoses.
Right. And that's a huge question. Where do we draw the line between AI being a tool to help us
Yeah.
and AI actually making the decisions?
It's a big difference between like suggesting a movie I might like versus deciding whether I get a loan.
Huge difference. And that's why it's so crucial to have really clear guidelines and ethical frameworks as AI takes on these bigger roles. We need to make sure it's aligned with our values, not just, crunching numbers.
One of the sources brought up AI augmentation, which sounds kind of interesting. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so AI augmentation is this idea of humans and AI working together, like a team. So instead of replacing humans, AI would complement our skills and make us better at what we do.
Oh, so it's more about empowering us.
Exactly. It recognizes that AI has strengths like processing tons of data and seeing patterns, but it also recognizes that humans have strengths like judgment and empathy.
So, like having a super smart co-pilot, someone to help you navigate, but you're still the one flying the plane?
Exactly. AI augmentation lets us use the power of AI while still keeping humans in control, which I think is really important.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about privacy, bias, and even this question of like who's calling the shots. It's clear that AI ethics is
Complicated and constantly evolving.
exactly. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
It is. There's just so much to consider.
what's the one thing you'd want our listener to really take away from all of this?
Hmm. I think it's that AI, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. It all depends on us, the people building it and using it.
So we're not just like along for the ride. We actually have a say in how this all unfolds.
Exactly. We need to be informed, to be involved, to really think about what we want AI to be like. We can't just assume it's going to be, ethical all by itself.
It's like we're writing the instruction manual as we go.
Yeah, I like that. And it's a manual that's going to need constant updating because AI keeps changing and, well, we're going to keep running into new ethical questions.
So this isn't a one-time conversation. It's something we got to keep talking about.
Absolutely. And those conversations need to be, honest. We got to talk about the good stuff, A&D, the potential problems, the risks.
One of the sources talked about how without clear guidelines and ethical frameworks, we could end up with AI making huge decisions, life-changing decisions,
Yeah.
but with no real accountability.
That's kind of scary when you think about it. And just shows how important it is to be proactive, to set things up right from the start instead of waiting for things to go wrong.
It's like if you build a house without a plan,
Right?
you might end up with something, but it might not be safe or even what you wanted.
Exactly. We need to make sure AI is built on a good foundation. Fairness, transparency, all of that.
Okay, so to our listener, if all this is feeling a bit overwhelming, well, you're not alone. AI ethics is complicated.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's important, too, because it affects all of us.
And you don't need to be like a computer whiz to get
No.
involved.
Nope. Just be curious, ask questions, learn about how AI is being used in your life. And if you have concerns, speak up.
Because the future of AI, it's not set in stone.
Right, we're shaping it right now through the choices we make, the things we do, the kind of future we want to see.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive into AI ethics, I gotta say. Thank you so much for sharing these sources with us.
It's been my pleasure.
They've given us so much to think about, and I hope they've given you some new ideas too.
And spark some more questions.
Yeah.
Because that's how we keep learning and figure this all out.
That's it for this deep dive into AI ethics. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do we even go from here? What's the next step?
Well, I think it starts with each of us,
What do you mean?
like learning more about AI, how it works, how it's being used,
Okay, yeah.
and then thinking about what we're comfortable with, what we think is ethical, and talking about it.
With, like, everyone.
Yeah. With friends, family, online, even with, the companies that are developing this stuff.
So we can kind of steer things in the right direction.
Exactly. Because the more we understand about AI and the more we talk about these ethical questions, the better chance we have of making sure it's used for good.
That makes sense.
And honestly, I think it's kind of exciting too.
Exciting.
Yeah, like we're at this moment where we get to help shape the future of technology. It's a huge responsibility, but it's also an amazing opportunity.
Wow, when you put it that way. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into AI ethics. Thank you so much for, guiding us through all this.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Seriously, I love talking about this stuff.
And to everyone listening, thank you for sending in these sources. They were so thought-provoking, and I think we all learned a lot today.
Hopefully, it'll get people thinking and talking about how we want to build the future with AI.
Exactly. That's a wrap on this deep dive into AI ethics. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep those questions coming.